Black Ops 3 has an unsolved mystery Easter egg yet to be solved. And there's been new information that has been surfacing throughout the community of Black Ops, some of the top YouTubers of the times. Mr. RoffleWaffles is my personal favorite, but through watching him over the past few weeks, and watching him younger was the shit. What's up guys, Mr. RoffleWaffles here, back with a new nonsense guide. Wow. Oh wow. He's gonna give us the breakdown of what's going on in this Black Ops 3 Impossible Easter egg.
The Black Ops 3 Zombies Impossible Easter egg has finally been solved.
Here we go.
Or has it? In case you don't know what the hell's going on, let me get you up to speed. During Black Ops 3 in 2015/16, Jason Blundell introduced this idea of an impossible Easter egg. It was something that he said would never be solved, and he was putting it into the game as a challenge to the zombies community because we kept solving all his other ciphers and clues and secrets, and he wanted something even more challenging to really test us all and see if we were as smart as we thought we were. In the years since he announced it, the community have obviously come forward with hundreds, if not thousands, of different theories about what this impossible Easter egg might be. And there have been a ton of misconceptions. People saying, oh, it's definitely an Easter egg that's just on Shadows of Evil. And actually, it's turned out, no, it's...
Okay, yo, he's actually gonna break down some pretty fire math in here as well. So intellectually prepare yourself, because he's gonna do some equations that connect to this Black Ops 3 story. And yes, it is needed in order to kind of get the information across. He'll explain it all.
Not just a specific thing that you can do in Shadows of Evil. Other people have said, oh, it's probably something that you can activate in the game somewhere. And then we've sort of all thought about it and gone, hold on, that doesn't really make sense. And Jason himself has actually commented saying that he wouldn't do that because he knows that that would just get data mined.
One of the assumptions I make when we talk about, big Easter eggs or things that are kind of hidden, that the stuff that's going on, I assume that everyone is going to take the code, take the Radiant, and take it apart. Which means anything that we could put in the script, and anything I could put in with Radiant, I'm assuming you could just open it up and find it. So if you're seeing anything and it looks like it's engineered, you're probably off, because you'd have already found that by now.
And so you might feel like maybe all of the theories that we've had have been totally off the mark and nobody's even come close to making progress on it. And that also wouldn't be true in Jason's own words. We've got this unsolvable Easter egg, which I'm sort of guessing there might be more than one.
There might be.
There might be, right? So is it something we've come at all close to, even just in the right sort of zone in Black Ops 3 so far?
Yes.
We have. Wow. That's just the biggest tease in the world. So this is pretty interesting. There's an impossible Easter egg that the community has made meaningful progress on that doesn't seem to be related to just a singular map in isolation, and that is not going to be something that we can just rip from the game files, but it is still in the game. There is still something hidden in there for us to uncover. So how do we bring all of those things together and unify them and to make it a consistent theory as to what this egg is? Well, that brings us to the present day, where the impossible Easter egg is still unsolved, but Skite Innit has just posted a video.
Big shout out to Skite Innit. I watched this guy's video as well, which inspired Mr. RoffleWaffles here to make his video. Both absolutely great. They have good explanations. I think Mr. RoffleWaffles adds a little bit extra, which creates some clarity in certain moments.
Making a whole
that Skite's video may have not put into.
I want to give props to Skite for his video. I think that it's very well made. It gives a really wonderful recap of the entire story in a lot more depth than I'm going to go into in this video. So if you'd like the full context here, I've linked his video in the description down below, and you guys are absolutely welcome and encouraged to go check it out. What I want to do is I want to laser in on the part of the discussion that I think you guys are going to be most interested in for this video, which is my take on things, and also where I think this is going to go next in solving this Easter egg. Because I think there's some stuff that Skite hasn't added to the picture that I want to...
What do you guys think is going to go next?
Shucks.
There's one part in this video, sorry for the spoilers, but he says, what if it's one of those Easter eggs where it's just it spells out EE, or it doesn't really have any cutscene or have any inherent value that we can necessarily get, but we get confirmation that we did the Easter egg. It's some real subtle moment. How insane would that be?
contribute to the discussion.
The community would be livid.
One of the things that
I don't know. It might be. It might be also
name
worth
of
it.
the KN-44 itself. Originally, before Black Ops 3 came out, the gun was actually named 2 different names, and then right before launch,
I remember this. I remember right before they were about to release. I don't remember the Arch 7, but the one day after this, I
in game,
remember.
we obviously know it as the KN-44. Now, one of Skite's discoveries is...
Or there was another name for it before the Arch 7.
Worked at Treyarch, or maybe still works at Treyarch.
But they mentioned later on in this video.
Told Skite that the name was changed for a zombies reason. It wasn't a legal thing like it's been speculated. It wasn't anything like that. It was a zombies-driven change. This is obviously a big...
Yo, you back? Really big, nerdy. Welcome back.
KN-44 doesn't just appear in the multiplayer and appear in the mystery box, but it also weirdly appears all over the zombies mode. It's really frequently referenced in a way that kind of feels bizarre. It's almost like the KN itself is a character in zombies. And the most notable example of this is this document, which we've obviously pieced together from scraps that we found. You glue all the scraps together. This is what it looks like. And it's a blueprint with Dr. Monty's signature in the corner and a whole load of interesting stuff. The summoning key in the center.
That's... Wow. I mean, the storytelling, true masterpiece. This was put through all the different giant maps. Wow. I'm acting like I know shit, but honestly, I learned all of this within the past 24 hours watching these.
And in the center,
I'm not a know-it-all for all this.
KN-44 wall buy,
But
inside
it's
this
super
box.
dope,
That
man.
type of box is very special. It's not just a cube, but it's a hypercube, which is this idea of a cube being represented in more than just 3 dimensions. We'll talk about this more in a second, because I need to go into some detail about the mathematics at play here, because they're very relevant, but we'll save that for a moment. So the KN is in the middle of this document, right? It's in the middle of this blueprint. And at the time, people kind of wrote it off, myself included, as, oh, well, KN could just be Chronorium, like that could be what it's relating to, and so it could just be a sort of play on words almost, and a reference to that. And the fact that the KN has been chosen here might not be super significant, like it could have been any gun really, but the KN-44 seems to be the kind of generic placeholder weapon that they use in the game for everything. And so maybe this is just intending to show that Dr. Monty uses Dr. Monty magic to manifest wall weapons in the world for the player. Like, we, in Black Ops 3, were just learning that he was doing that with gobblegums, for example. We learned that he did that with things like the mystery box or things like the perks that you can buy, like all these sorts of things. They were infused with so much of Dr. Monty's magic. And so maybe this is just a blueprint showing that this is how Dr. Monty makes wall chalks work. And so why not show a KN-44 as just an example weapon to indicate that that's what the blueprint is sort of describing. So there were theories back then as to what this all meant, but it felt like it was a lot of work to do. It was a real length to go to. Why explain that he's involved with perks or the box or whatever one way, and then why be so complex and convoluted when specifically talking about his wall chalks? Like, it's just a bit weird. So it felt like maybe there was more to the puzzle here. Maybe there was something that had been unfound by the community, something that we had missed maybe. And so people made further speculation saying, okay, well, it's on a grid. Could it be that there's like some kind of chessboard situation happening here? Maybe we need to use the grid squares here and like overlay it over a given map and then go to a location on a map. And maybe the direction that the gun is pointing is important, and like all those sorts of questions, right? And that kind of brings us to Skite's big theory, which is that if we combine the questions around the name of the KN-44 with the cube that we're seeing the KN-44 displayed inside here, or rather its technical name, the hypercube, we might be able to kind of make some progress, because one might affect the other. Like, we've kind of treated them as separate for all these years, but maybe there is a more sort of literal link between the two. I'll play a clip from this now so you can see what Skite says.
It can't just be that the KN stood for Chronorium. That's just too simple. So I had to keep on digging, and one day when reading more on hypercubes, it all hit me at once. The KN-44 is not a name. It's a fucking equation. A hypercube is made up of K- cubes and N- cube. When displaying a standard hypercube, it is written as wow.
I mean, what type of effort did they go through to put this into the game?
K-4 or N-4. Combine those together, what do you get?
KN44.
The
Wow.
impossible
Wow.
puzzle, KN44, it was all connected and everything started to make sense. That's why he wanted the
I love the way that he put that.
A-4 or N-4.
Put those two together.
What do you get? It's a fucking KN44. The impossible puzzle, the KN44, it was all connected.
Mind blown.
And everything
Mic
started to make
drop.
sense. That's why he wanted the name change from the RX-7 to the KN44. That's why he originally said it would be hidden across multiple arenas. That's why he specifically mentioned ciphers and the torn paper Easter egg in this interview. That's why the only two things in Black Ops 3 Zombies that never got answered, he told us not to forget. It all checked out, and for the first time ever hunting this egg, I actually found something of substance, something that definitely wasn't a coincidence.
The way you presented this is really great. It really feels like opening the door on a massive discovery that's going to mean that this impossible egg gets solved pretty much straight away. And I don't want to put a dampener on the situation here, but I do want to just make sure that we're all kind of driving in the right direction as to what the implications might be. And to do that, honestly, I think I'm going to need to use the whiteboard. Also, while getting my setup in place to do the whiteboard segment, I forgot to mention these are still on sale, just by the way. So if you want to get yourself some really sick zombies merch from YouTube's, there's a link in the description down below. You can use code Milo to get a discount as well. They've got these little guys. They've got Juggernog machines, the Pack-a-Punch, there's all sorts. So use code Milo, get yourself a discount. Also, I'm about to use some mathematical terms, which at first might be a little bit confusing, but don't worry, I'll explain exactly what they mean so that everybody can understand. I don't want to leave anybody behind here.
Why do you not want to leave
this
anybody?
kind of guy. So,
Of course, because he's a no-nonsense guy. Just like his bow guides.
so things simply and easily is what I do. So with that said, hypercubes,
Keeps it true.
as a type
Battle
of
of shape is like
geometry,
race.
right? Like as a type of shape, if you will, are a set of different shapes that follow kind of rules as to how they are constructed. And the difference between one hypercube and another is the number of dimensions that the hypercube has. So if we start with some simple shapes, we have a square, and we can simply understand that in this flat plane of the whiteboard that we're using here, this square is two-dimensional, right? You've got the x-axis going along this way. You've got the y-axis going up like that. I wish these pens worked better. I really need to buy better whiteboard pens. Yeah, that's better. So this is two-dimensional. And just so we can keep track of that, let's sort of mark that down. And we're going to use n to remind ourselves how many dimensions it has. So we're going to say n equals 2, okay? We'll talk more about this mysterious n thing in a moment, but let's just do a cube as an example. So
Okay.
I'm going to draw a kind of crappy cube here like this. This is obviously three-dimensional, and the axes would be, well, you can go along this
Taking
way,
my
that's
notes.
your x-axis. You can go up like we did before, that's your y-axis. But now you can actually go down the cube like that. Like you can go through the whiteboard almost, and that is your z-axis just there. So for this now,
Okay, he's
n
lost me.
equals 3. And so the question
No, I know
is,
what that is.
what happens
X, Y,
when
Z.
n
It's okay.
equals 4? Like we can
follow.
go the other
I'm
way.
here.
We can go to n equals 1. N equals 1 is much more simple. That's one-dimensional, n being the number of dimensions. What is a one-dimensional shape? Well, it's a line, because a line is just the x-axis and there's no y-axis, right? So the only thing you can do is move along the plane. So that's one-dimensional. You can even do 0. With n equals 0, you no longer have any movement this way or this way or this way or anywhere. So you're basically just a dot. Like that is a way that we can kind of visualize like as something zero dimensional. Like there is no dimension in that case. So you're just a point. The dimension is the range over which you move. But if there is no movement to be had, then you're just in place. You're not going anywhere, kind of thing, right? So you can go to 0. You can't go negative. That's not a thing. So we're going to stay with just non-negative numbers for what n is able to be here. But as soon as you get to n equals 4, starts to get really hard to think about, because we as humans are used to three-dimensional space, right? We are used to moving forwards or backwards. That's one dimension. Left or right, that's another dimension. Up or down, that's another dimension. But what's the fourth one? And remember, we're not talking about like time as its own dimension, like before and after. That technically is another sort of axis to move along. But we're talking about spatial dimensions here. N equals 4, it's a little bit more confusing. But that's where hypercube theory kind of enters the picture. So if I just get rid of all of this for a moment, we can summarize everything we just said with the following statement.
Okay, wait. Let's recap, y'all. Okay. N1, 1 line. N2, 2 lines. N3, 3 lines. 3 lines. Line means dimension in this scenario. N equals 4, 4 dimensions. So this is how he's getting to this.
Spatial dimensions
do this.
N equals 4, it's a little bit more confusing. But that's
N
where
equals spatial dimensions.
theory kind of enters the picture. So if I just get rid of all of this for a moment,
I'm pretty sure.
we can summarize everything we just said with the following statement. An n-dimensional hypercube can be called an n-cube and is an n-dimensional analog of a square, which we understand is n equals 2, or a cube, which we understand being n equals 3. Okay, so next we need to introduce this concept called graph theory. And to be very oversimplifying here, basically, graph theory is just a way to think about shapes, but instead of thinking about a random shape in terms of how it looks on a page, like, okay, yeah, like, this is a square. Nice. Instead, in graph theory, you might say, okay, well, it's not just a square. Actually, this is a graph, right? This is actually like a network of nodes. Like, this is a point here. This is a vertex. Then you've got another one here. You've got another one in the corner, another one there. And so we can describe that square as a relation between those points. And so we can use this sort of language of mathematics, this graph theory language.
Okay, Mr. RoffleWaffles.
Describe hypercubes like we were just doing a moment ago. So we were using n as the number of dimensions, right?
I mean, what a loop-in.
And rather than saying like n-dimensional cube, we're actually going to create a list of these potential objects, right? These different dimension objects.
Okay.
We're going to start a list called Qn, where n is a little n. This is not the same as saying like Qn.
You're like good. Too early for those.
Because if you imagine writing Qn like this in an equation might be quite confusing. Like let's say you're doing like 4 times like 3 Qn, like that might suddenly look quite strange because you've got 2 separate letters here. You don't know if this is Q times n or if this is something else. But if you wrote 4 times 3 Q small n, then you know that n is just like a label that's been applied to the Q. And so then there's sort of no ambiguity remaining, okay? So that's why we use small n like this. It's a little subscript n. And n, again, still is the number of dimensions. And like we said, we're not going to go negative. It's going to be non-negative whole numbers. You can't have like a half dimension. So that means that n, and this is going to be some mathsy terms, give me a second, is in the set here of non-negative integers.
Mr. RoffleWaffles.
So this is just a list, okay?
Play Black Ops.
This is just us saying
wow.
n is
I mean,
some
that means nothing. I guess he can't really do anything. Black Ops 3 is just what he made videos about. Wow. I mean, pulled this one out the bag. Okay.
number in this set of numbers, and that number could be 0, like
I'm impressed.
It could be 1, it could be 2, upwards. And so that means that you could have Q0, you could have Q1, you could have Q2, you could have Q3, you could have Q4, and that could go upwards to any higher dimension. And the Q here, the reason we're mentioning Q, we're bringing Q into the situation, is because Q is basically just our label for which hypercube graph we are referring to. So if we're talking about Q3, that is the graph for a 3-dimensional hypercube. So every single one of these Qs is a graph for a hypercube. Now, sometimes mathematicians will not always use this same letter N. N is very commonly used, but you also sometimes see people using the letter K. And you see this all across mathematics. This isn't just related to hypercubes. This happens everywhere in any field really that's using maths. The actual letter you're using here is rarely super necessary unless you're referring to a sort of named constant or something. But really, we're just using n because we need something to represent this list, and this could equivalently be something else. So you could also say qk, where k is the exact same thing that we just had there. And so what this would mean is the q3 here is the exact same thing. It's the graph for a three-dimensional hypercube, but it's just that when we're writing this in a generalized sense, instead of saying that 3 is what our n is equal to in the initial scenario, now we're just saying it's what our k is equal to. We would just say that the cube is k-dimensional. And this is where I think Skite's first statement that I personally want to sort of reframe enters the scene. So Skite in his video says this.
It's a fucking equation. A hypercube is made up of k minus cubes and n minus cube.
So the thing that I think is just sort of slightly confusing about this, and again, if I'm wrong, please correct me. This isn't an argument. I'm not trying to sort of like make fun of anything here or anything like that. I'm just trying to make sure that we all mutually understand what's going on. And if I need correcting, then please do. But when he says that it's an equation and a hypercube is made up of k cubes and n cubes, I think that kind of gives the visual image in your mind that a hypercube kind of has a k cube and an n cube, and if you sort of connect them together, that is what makes a hypercube. But I would reframe that thinking, and I would basically say, actually, a hypercube just is an n cube. And it's not an n cube and a k cube. It's just that some people call them n cubes and other people call them k cubes, but it's not this thing where you're like taking an n cube and a k cube and there's like a sort of relation between them that turns it into a hypercube. And so when he says like those things go into the equation for it, like I think that's a misconception. And we can use an example of a square, okay? A square is a 2 cube, is a 2-dimensional hypercube where n equals 2, okay? And a 2 cube, a square, if we use Skite's language of it being made up of k cubes and n cubes, would therefore be made up of 2 cubes and 2 cubes, because n equals 2 and k equals 2. But in that scenario, like, why are we using n and k to refer to the same thing, the dimensionality of the cube? And also, why are we saying that a 2 cube, which is what a square is a 2 cube, is made up of 2 cubes and 2 cubes? Like, it's not. It just is a 2 cube. So I think that's the first slight misconception. And then the second bit is this bit about sort of combining them together. So Skite says if you take k minus 4 and n minus 4 and overlap them together, you get kn 44. And part of me really agrees with Skite here, and part of me just wants to make sure, again, that we're thinking about this in the right way. First of all, a little devil's advocate argument, just to sort of set the scene. Skite overlaps these two things in his video, and I see no reason why you couldn't, for example, name a weapon K4N4 if you wanted to. Like, I don't think it necessarily has to be distributed in this particular way. I'm also realizing here, my K here really does look quite like a 4, so I'm just going to rewrite this to be a little bit clearer. Sorry about that. It's just the way my writing looks. But sort of pushing that particular quirk aside, the question I would come back to is why, when writing it this way, would K and N, which Skite shows in his video, are both variables that you can use to just describe the dimensionality, right? To describe it being an N cube or it being a K cube. Why would both of those be in the name? Like, it's giving the same information twice. It's saying four-dimensional. And so I think what Skite didn't kind of get to in his video, but what might be a next step here that we can investigate, is the idea that there may well be some kind of intention for one of these two variables to be a 4, indicating a 4-dimensional cube. So let's, for argument's sake, say n equals 4, but then k would need to be something else entirely. Like, k would need to not be relating to dimension count. It would need to be something else. And so the question would be, what is this k? Now, something that I think is exactly the sort of thing that Jason would do is that he might be a fan of things like magic hypercubes, for example. So I don't believe...
Magic hypercubes.
Magic hypercubes are a special type of hypercube, and in magic hypercubes, you usually use k to define the dimension count, but n is also used as a separate thing. Specifically, it's the array of integers along each dimension of the cube. And you have this thing called this common sum of such a hypercube, and that's called the magic constant of that hypercube, and the equation for the magic constant is this. That is our magic hypercube constant equation. And you'll see that here we have n and we have k, which is something we felt like we were looking for before, but it didn't make sense just in the plain language of regular hypercubes. And in the scenario where, funnily enough, k equals 4, like that, if a hypercube satisfies the rules for it to be defined as a magic hypercube, then we can actually call it, when k equals 4, a magic tesseract. So just to recap where I'm going with this, basically in this formula, n is the length of the side of the hypercube, and k is how many dimensions
bombs
the
right now.
hypercube has.
Wow.
And I think that Jason is just the sort of person that would be really into this.
What a great math lesson for today.
Stuff. Like, I think he would love this stuff. And so what he might have done is he might have created basically a joke with the name of the KN44 to sort of say to us that the KN itself is sort of a nod to this concept of this magic tesseract. And I also have a crackhead theory. I have a truly crazy theory that I think is just going to be interesting food for thought for you guys as we continue to think about this Easter egg that I want to present you with, because I think you'll like it, but it is very abstract. So I want you to bear with me while I try and get through this idea. And honestly, I might need the whiteboard again, so I'm just going to turn this around. If you think of a regular, just like a grid, right? Just a regular ass grid, and you have a coordinate on that grid that's like 3 on the x-axis, 4 on the y-axis, you can describe where it is, right? And Jason would know that if there was an item in game in Shadows of Evil, and it was at a specific sort of coordinate grid square, then we would be able to just find that in the game files, and instantly, if that was somehow an Easter egg or related to an Easter egg, we would just be like, okay, found the Easter egg, done, finished, right? So this is too simple. Jason can't do this, but what if what Jason did is he said, okay, this KN44 is a recurring theme in zombies. And so what if I use that almost to construct my own kind of a dimension on which to lay these clues? So let me further explain what I mean. So this would just be the coordinates in Shadows of Evil, right? Like the x-axis, y-axis of Shadows, you go to that spot, on the ground, you find a thing, right? Similarly, that could be another map. That could be Zetsabo over here. That could be a thing like, it could be like 1, 5, okay? And so again, if individually that was an Easter egg of some kind, we would just look at it and be like, okay, well, I found it from the game code. So like, that was easy. Similarly, if in some promotional art for the game, like something external to the game, if they released an asset or something, and that asset had a KN44 that was sort of snuck in there, then people might be like, oh, okay, it's a KN44. Easy. Finished. And similarly, if there was a cutscene, for instance, that had the KN44 in it, let's draw a cutscene with its little black bars here. Maybe it's Gorod Cravey with
Alexa, stop.
And it's Nikolai.
All right, let's finish this video up and I'm going to go get my laundry.
Then again, it might be like, oh, I found the KN44. Well, easy peasy, Easter egg solved. But what I wonder is, instead of saying, okay, it's a spatial Easter egg, and instead of saying, oh, it's just like a visual Easter egg like this, I wonder if Jason has said, you know what? I'm going to create a treasure map here, but the treasure map isn't in physical space. It's not an XY coordinate like this, and nor is it just purely in visual space in terms of being present in a cutscene. But what if the dimensions of Jason's treasure map, okay, instead of being XY spatial coordinates, what if those dimensions are just everything within the product of Black Ops 3? Now, I know this is really ambiguous, and it's not going to make immediate sense, but just work with me here. Let's say in this box, okay, let's say this is Black Ops 3. Like everything in here along X is like going in one direction in Black Ops 3, and along Y, it's going in another direction. Maybe this is like spatial on the X-axis, visual on the Y-axis, just for an example, okay? What Jason could do is he could place these individual components inside Black Ops 3 in intentional places. He could be like, okay, like maybe let's say actually that this axis is like is time, and maybe this axis is space, for example. Okay, and so in this scenario, he might be like, okay, I need a marker to indicate when something is relating to this treasure map that I'm creating and when it's not. And the marker could be the KN44. So Jason could say, okay, prior to launch, it was called something else, so it wasn't relevant, right? But at t equals 0, the game comes out and Shadows of Evil releases. And so there could be a bunch of things on this line for t equals 0, which could have different sort of spatial components. Let's say that the spatial component is how far away from the spawn each KN44 is, just as an example. And so you might have like one KN44 that's here. You could have another KN44 that's much further. You could have another KN44 that's really far. And then you could say, okay, well, if we then connect this to the next map, DE, maybe in DE, there's a KN44, again, there's like here, and here. And then maybe you go, oh, hold on. The Giant also came out at the same time as Shadows of Evil, so we missed some KN44s. Maybe there was a KN44 here. And then you could think further into the future, okay, oh, we've got Zetsubo now. Maybe there's loads actually in Zetsubo. Maybe it's like a full sort of line like that. And then you could think, okay, Gorod Krovi. And maybe Gorod Krovi has like, again, just some sort of marks in place. So this would be a very abstract way of connecting the dots on these placements of these KN44s or these inclusions of these KN44s. And it would be incredibly difficult to actually find the right conception of this that Jason had in his head when he was putting all these things together. Like, it would be very, very difficult. But that might be why he was telling us this whole time to think kind of in 4 dimensions, right? Because we have the X, Y dimension of space. We have the Z dimension going up or down. Fine. But what's the 4th dimension, right? If we get away from all these things that can just be solved in regular spatial coordinates or whatever, we start thinking about what this 4th dimension is. The 4th dimension is the medium itself in some ways. And the medium itself is Black Ops 3. And so I sort of wonder if what he was sort of coyly doing, sneakily doing, is saying, yeah, I've created this medium, literally this dimension, Black Ops 3, along which I've sprinkled these KN44s. And if you join all the dots of the KN44s in Black Ops 3, what if you join the dots together and it's something like this, and it says Easter egg, or it's like some kind of reference. It's something that we clearly would look at and go, we've solved it, we've done it, we've actually figured it out. This, to me, is why I have...
This is the theory I'd probably go with. I feel like this makes sense to me.
Trying to solve the impossible Easter egg, because I think it is such a nugget of Jason's insanity, and I think that the likelihood of it being something so hard to solve is so great.
All right, but let's ask this, y'all. Let's be real. Is the One Piece real? Yeah, that's real.
Beyond my powers.
The One Piece
do think that.
is real.
These sorts of crazy ramblings here, and I think it's these sorts of crazy ramblings here that probably will eventually get us towards some kind of solution. I think the Skite's video is fantastic, getting us thinking about K and N not as chronorium, but actually as variables, okay, that might indicate an array of numbers or something, and that we might then be able to use in conjunction with these sorts of crazy crackpot ideas to make some kind of meaningful progress. That is fantastic, and I'm so happy the Skite has made that leap, that insight, and has also displayed it to you guys and to the world in such a clear way. I think that his video really is great. It's just that while we talk about this stuff, we need to make sure that we're careful about getting mixed up with things like the cubes being in the cubes and things along those lines. I don't have an answer for you as to what the impossible Easter egg actually means. I don't think we're there yet. But I think that this is genuine, meaningful progress, and the right person that comes along with the right intuition about why these 4s are relevant. Like, is it n equals 4, k equals 4? Is it n equals 44 and then k is something else? Is it to do with magic hypercubes? Is it to do with magic tesseracts? Is there some kind of broader dimensional kind of insight that Jason is pushing us towards there? Like, somebody will connect the dots and try something one day, and it's gonna work. And it's not gonna work in-game, but rather it's going to do something like this. This is the best way I can possibly describe how Jason can put an Easter egg in the game without it being in the game. Because the game is the medium. The game is now the ground on which the treasure map is drawn. It's just not drawn in real XY space. It's drawn in Black Ops 3 space. So hopefully I've made this clear and explained this in a way that you guys have understood.
Very much so. Thank you, Mr. RoffleWaffles.
Video and subscribe.
You are... Oh, yes. I already liked it. Make sure you guys go like and subscribe.
If you want to get one of these little YouTube figures, they've got a whole bunch of zombies ones. Use code Milo. You'll get a discount. See you guys.
Black Ops 3 Zombies Impossible Easter Egg breakthrough. Wow. I mean, what a breakthrough. Nerdy. I'll be right back, y'all.